"I think you married your brother." That's what the voice on the phone said. And just like that, the world Emma knew, the love she trusted, the vows she'd whispered, the life she thought she was building, shattered in an instant. Her hands went numb. Her mouth wouldn't close. The words kept echoing, but her brain refused to make sense of them, because it couldn't be true. It couldn't. She'd married Jack in front of everyone they loved. She wore white. He cried when he saw her. Their parents, well, the pieces of family they still spoke to, had smiled and clapped and said it was fate. No one said a word. No one warned them. No one even hinted. They weren't just lovers. They were soulmates, best friends, survivors of their own pasts. Emma had grown up with a mother who locked doors from the inside and cried alone in the laundry room. Jack's father vanished before he could say dad. They were broken in the same places. Maybe that's why it felt so perfect. Until the call. Until the cousin who'd been building a cute little family tree for fun stumbled onto something she shouldn't have. Something buried, hidden, forgotten, or erased. Jack's mother, Emma's grandfather, a year that didn't line up, a birth certificate missing a name. Emma didn't want to believe it, so she laughed. She said it must be a glitch, an error, some other Jack, some other mother. But her cousin kept talking. Her voice broke when she said, "I checked 3 different sources. Emma, I wouldn't be calling if I wasn't sure." And Emma just went silent. Because suddenly, little things she'd never thought twice about started crawling back, like the way Jack's smile reminded her of someone. The way her mother always looked slightly uncomfortable around him, even though she never said why. But this wasn't some cute coincidence. Because on that tangled tree of relatives and records, there was one line connecting them, one that should never have been crossed. And Emma hadn't told Jack yet, not a word. Emma didn't sleep that night. She lay beside Jack, listening to his breathing, watching the rise and fall of his chest, memorizing the shape of his hand resting near hers, the same hand that had slipped a ring onto her finger just 6 months earlier. And all she could think was, what if it's true? What if everything we are is a lie? She wanted to tell him. God, she almost did, 3 times. But every time she opened her mouth, something inside her screamed, don't. Because what if it wasn't true? What if this was just some twisted coincidence? People get names wrong all the time. Families lose track, records glitch, right? So instead, she dug, quietly, desperately. She called the hospital where Jack had been born. No luck. She reached out to a woman who'd once been friends with her mother decades ago. And then she did something she never thought she'd do. She called her father. They hadn't spoken in years. He'd left when she was 9, remarried, moved across the country, but he answered on the second ring. "Emma?" he said cautiously. "Is everything okay?" She almost laughed, because how could she explain it? How do you say, "Hi Dad, quick question. Did you ever have an affair that resulted in a secret child I accidentally married?" But he went quiet when she asked about her grandfather, when she mentioned Jack's mother's name. And then he said something that made her stomach turn. "Where did you hear that name?" Not "who is that?" Not "I don't know what you're talking about." Just, "Where did you hear that name?" Emma pushed, harder than she'd ever dared. And finally, he sighed, a long, heavy sound. She was taken in, just for a while. Your grandfather, he tried to help. Her mom had issues. It was never meant to be permanent. "Did he?" Emma's voice cracked. "Was he the father?" Silence. Then, "Your mom always said it wasn't his, that the timing didn't make sense." Not no, not even close. Emma hung up, hands shaking. And when she turned to look at Jack, still sleeping peacefully, she couldn't stop crying. Because even if it wasn't true, even if they weren't related by blood, the fact that it was even possible meant everything between them had already started to fall apart. Jack always knew when Emma was holding something back. He could feel it in the quiet, not silence, but the space between words. She still smiled, still kissed his cheek, still made coffee the way he liked it, but it was like she wasn't really there, like some invisible wall had gone up overnight and he wasn't allowed through. At first, he thought she was just tired. Work had been hard lately. Maybe it was hormones. Maybe she was second-guessing the whole marriage thing. People did, but then it got worse. She started locking her phone, flinching when he walked into the room. She stopped singing in the car. She stopped laughing. And the worst part? She wouldn't tell him why. "Are you okay?" he asked one night. Emma paused. Too long. "Yeah, just tired." He nodded, pretended to believe her, but something about her eyes, they weren't tired. They were haunted. So he started paying attention, and what he noticed chilled him. She was calling someone, often, always in the other room. Her cousin? Maybe? Her mom? She'd whisper, "Hang up fast, delete the logs." She thought he wouldn't see. And then one day, by accident, he found the folder. A manila envelope shoved behind some old sweaters in her closet. Inside, photocopies, scribbled notes, family trees, his family, birth records, a picture of his mother as a teenager. His own birth certificate with certain sections highlighted in yellow. It felt like being dissected, like someone had cut him open and pinned his heart to a board. Why was she doing this? What was she looking for? And then he saw the name. His mother's maiden name, next to Emma's grandfather's, and it clicked. Not all at once, not clearly, but the seed was planted. Something was wrong. He slammed the envelope shut, put it back exactly where he found it, said nothing. But that night, he didn't sleep either. Because for the first time since they met, Jack was afraid of what Emma knew. And what she wasn't telling him might destroy them both. Emma knew the envelope was missing before she saw it. She felt it, like a shift in the air. She opened the closet and her hands went cold. The sweaters were out of place, just slightly, but enough. He knew, or at least he'd seen something. She sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall, willing herself not to panic. But her chest was already tightening, her thoughts spiraling, fast and dark and out of control. What if he hates me? What if he leaves? What if I've ruined everything? Jack came home late. He didn't say much, just looked at her like he was seeing a stranger. She wanted to confess, just say it, get it out, but the words tasted like poison. How do you tell the love of your life that your marriage might be incest? That you've been quietly investigating whether you're siblings? So instead, she asked, "Are you okay?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Shouldn't I be asking you that?" Her heart nearly stopped. "What do you mean?" Jack didn't answer right away. He walked into the kitchen, poured a drink. Then, "I found your folder." Silence. "I wasn't snooping," he said, not looking at her. "I was putting away laundry. It just fell out." More silence. Then he finally looked at her. "What the hell is going on, Emma?" She couldn't lie. Not anymore. "I think we're related," she said, barely a whisper. "I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure it out. I didn't want to scare you until I knew for sure." He stared at her like she'd slapped him, then stepped back. "You think I'm your what?" She tried to explain about the cousin, the tree, the records, the missing name, but he wasn't hearing it. His face was unreadable, pale, quiet. And then he said something that stopped her heart. "My mom always told me never to ask about my real father." Emma blinked. "What?" Jack nodded slowly. She said he was a mistake, someone she was ashamed of, someone she was afraid of. And Emma felt her legs give out beneath her. Because the man Jack described sounded a lot like her grandfather. Jack hadn't spoken to his mother in over 2 years. Their last conversation ended in shouting, her accusing him of being ungrateful, him calling her a liar. But now, sitting on the floor of their bedroom, holding the pieces of their love like broken glass in his hands, he knew there was only one person left who could give him answers. He didn't tell Emma. He couldn't. Not yet. Not until he knew whether the nightmare she'd uncovered was real or just an echo of something they didn't understand. So he drove. 5 hours in silence, through back roads and long stretches of forest that blurred past like ghosts. Her house looked smaller than he remembered. The paint peeling, the porch light flickering like it couldn't decide whether to die or hold on. She opened the door without smiling. "I thought you were never coming back." He didn't waste time. "I need to know the truth." She blinked. "About what?" He held up a copy of the family tree Emma had built, watched her face drain of color. "You said never to ask about him." "I didn't, but now I have to." His voice cracked. "Was he Emma's grandfather?" Her mouth opened, then closed, and then she nodded. Just once, a tiny motion, like her head was too heavy to move. "I was 16, she said quietly. "Your grandmother was sick. I was in the system. He offered me a place to stay." Her eyes filled with something beyond shame, something closer to fear. "I didn't understand it then. I just thought he was kind." Jack couldn't breathe. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew who he was. You knew all this time." She reached for him. He stepped back. "I was trying to protect you," she said. "You were a child. You didn't need to know where you came from. It wouldn't have changed anything." Jack stared at her, feeling a scream build in his chest. It would have changed everything. She looked away, and that's when she said something that made his blood run cold. "I tried to stop the wedding." Jack froze. "What?" "I sent her mother a letter, told her the truth, begged her to tell Emma." Jack's voice shook. She never did. And then the pieces clicked into place. Emma's mother, the tension, the way she'd flinched when she first met Jack, the way she'd always avoided talking about the past. She knew. She'd known all along. Emma's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She could barely hold the steering wheel. The moment Jack walked in and told her what his mother had said, everything inside her crumbled. Not just because the truth was finally out, but because it wasn't new to everyone. Her mother had known. All this time, Emma thought about all the moments that should have felt off but didn't register. The way her mom never smiled in Jack's presence. The tight-lipped politeness at the wedding. How she disappeared for long stretches afterward. She always said she was just adjusting, that she wanted to give Emma space. But now it was obvious. She hadn't been giving her space. She'd been hiding. Emma drove to her childhood home without calling, without warning. She couldn't risk giving her mother time to prepare another lie. She knocked hard, 3 times. When her mom answered the door, she looked tired, older than she remembered, like the years had caught up all at once. "Emma," she said softly. But Emma didn't waste time. "You knew." Her mother's face went still, not surprised, just braced. "I don't know what you mean." Emma's voice rose. "Don't lie to me. Did you get a letter from Jack's mother before the wedding?" Silence. Then, finally, a slow, tired nod. Emma felt like the floor had vanished beneath her. "Why didn't you say anything?" Her mother stepped back, eyes glassy. "Because you were happy. You had finally found someone who made you feel safe. You were alive again. I couldn't destroy that." Emma's heart twisted. "So you let me marry my half-brother instead?" Tears welled in her mother's eyes. "It was never supposed to go that far. I thought the letter was a bluff, or maybe a mistake. I told myself it couldn't be true. I needed it not to be true." Emma backed away, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "You let me build a life on a lie. You let me fall in love with someone who shares my blood." Her mother reached for her. "Please." Emma pulled away. "Don't touch me." She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. And as she sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, gasping for breath, she realized something else. If her mother lied about this, what else was she hiding? Emma didn't go home. She couldn't. Not yet. She drove until her phone died, until the roads blurred into one another, until the sun disappeared behind a curtain of trees. When she finally stopped, it was at a motel with peeling paint and flickering lights, the kind of place people went to disappear. She needed to think, to breathe, to understand. Because now it wasn't just about her and Jack. It wasn't even about the marriage anymore. It was about the legacy of lies she'd been raised in, and the man who'd started it all, her grandfather. She had always seen him as a complicated man, strict, cold, but helpful when it counted, the kind of man who sat at the head of the table but never really felt like he belonged there. He died when she was 23, a stroke, sudden, no time for questions, no time for answers. But now, she had questions, too many, and she needed someone who might still remember the truth. So she called her aunt, her grandfather's oldest daughter, a woman Emma had barely spoken to in years. At first, the woman didn't pick up. Then finally, "Emma, is everything okay?" Emma got straight to the point. "I need to know about Dad," she said. "About the foster girl he took in, the one who had Jack." The line went quiet. Then, "I always wondered when someone would ask." Emma sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding. "So it's true?" Her aunt exhaled. "It's worse than you think." She told Emma that the girl, Jack's mother, hadn't been the only one. There had been others, quiet girls, lost girls, ones he brought in to help, but help came with conditions, unspoken ones. "He had a way of making you feel like you owed him," her aunt said. "And once you owed him, he owned you." Emma felt her stomach twist. Her aunt hesitated, then added, "Your mom knew. We all did. But nobody ever talked. He had too much control, too much fear around him." Emma couldn't stop shaking. Why didn't anyone stop him? Her aunt's voice cracked. "Because we were young and scared, and he knew how to bury secrets better than anyone." And that's when Emma realized Jack wasn't just the product of a hidden relationship. He was the result of something predatory, something sick, something that had haunted her family for decades. And now, unknowingly, she had married into it, which meant the blood between them wasn't just shared, it was cursed. Jack didn't answer his phone for 2 days, not because he was trying to punish Emma, but because he didn't know how to speak without shattering. Every time he thought about her face, about the way she'd looked at him when she told him they might be related, he felt like he was going to vomit. He couldn't look in the mirror, couldn't touch his own skin without wondering who he was. Not as a husband, not as a son, but as a person. What did it mean that his life had been built on silence? That his mother had lied? That Emma's family had lied? That even his existence felt like something stolen from the darkness? He hadn't asked to be born. He hadn't asked to be buried under someone else's sins. But now, he was choking on them. He stared at the photo from their wedding, Emma in white, eyes glowing, lips trembling from joy, and all he could think was that love even real? Or was it some sick echo of trauma passed down from the people who hurt us? So he did the only thing he could. He packed a bag, left his ring on the nightstand, and drove to a cabin upstate that his friend had let him borrow once. No phone service, no internet, just space. He needed space. To think, to unravel, to fall apart where nobody could see. And in that silence, he started to write a letter, not to Emma, but to the child they'd never had. A letter he knew he would never send. He wrote about love, about how powerful and twisted and blinding it could be, how sometimes it saved you, and sometimes it disguised the worst parts of your story. He wrote about how sorry he was, not for loving Emma, but for being born into a legacy that made that love dangerous. And then he asked the question that had been rotting inside him. If love is real, does it matter how it started? He didn't know the answer, but he knew one thing: he couldn't go back. Not like this. Not until he knew who he really was without her. And not until he decided whether knowing the truth meant he had to let her go forever. The silence was the worst part. Not the leaving, not even the letter, just the absence. The emptiness where Jack used to be, his voice in the hallway, the scent on his pillow, the way he always left the light on for her, even if he went to bed first. Emma had read his letter 4 times. Each time, it cracked something deeper inside her. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say, "I love you." And she couldn't live with that. Not without knowing if the story was truly over or just paused in the cruelest place possible. So she tracked down the cabin, called Jack's old friend, drove 6 hours without stopping, without sleeping, with nothing but his wedding ring clenched in her fist. When she pulled up, the porch light was off. The car was there, but the house felt still. She knocked. No answer. She tried the door. Unlocked. "Jack?" she whispered. "It's me." She stepped inside. The fireplace was cold, the air stale. And then she saw him, sitting on the floor, knees drawn up to his chest, eyes bloodshot. He looked at her like she was a ghost. She didn't speak, just walked over and sat beside him. For a long time, they said nothing. Then finally, he asked, "Do you hate me?" She shook her head. "Never." He looked at the ring in her hand. "Then why do I feel like I'm something dirty?" She put her hand on his. "Because they made us feel that way. But we didn't do anything wrong. We loved each other." His voice cracked. "What does that even mean now?" Emma reached into her coat and pulled out a file. One last thing her aunt had sent her before she came. A sealed envelope labeled "Confidential." Inside was a paternity report, dated months after Jack was born. Emma had almost thrown it away, but something stopped her. She handed it to Jack. He opened it with shaking hands. Read it once, then again, and his breath caught in his throat. Because next to biological father, where her grandfather's name should have been, was a line that said, "Inconclusive. Genetic match does not support alleged paternity." Jack looked up at her, eyes wide. "You mean he wasn't my father?" Emma nodded slowly. "It's not our blood that's shared, just the pain." But before they could speak again, Jack's phone buzzed. A voicemail from his mother. He put it on speaker, and as they listened, her voice broke through the static. "I lied. I lied because I wanted to protect you. But he wasn't your father, Jack. He was mine." Emma's mouth fell open, because that meant Jack wasn't her half-brother, he was her uncle. Emma didn't move. She couldn't. The words still rang in her ears, like a curse she couldn't unhear. "He wasn't your father, Jack. He was mine." Her mind scrambled to process it, to untangle the web that kept growing tighter with every answer. The man who raised her mother was also Jack's father, which meant the man she'd loved, the man she married, the man who knew her body better than anyone on earth, was her uncle? Not by choice, not by love, by blood. The silence between them was deafening. Jack stood up slowly, as if gravity itself had betrayed him. "So that's it," he said almost to himself. "I was the secret all along, hidden like a scar nobody wanted to name." Emma tried to breathe, but every inhale felt like drowning. "I don't care what anyone says," she whispered. "You're not a scar. You're not a mistake. You're the only person who's ever really seen me." Jack looked at her, eyes hollow. "But what are we now?" She shook her head. "I don't know." They sat there, 2 broken pieces of a family neither of them asked to be born into. And then he said the words she wasn't ready for. "I think I have to leave." Emma blinked. "For how long?" He looked down. "Forever." She felt the floor drop beneath her. "Don't do that. Please. We didn't know. We didn't choose this." Jack's voice cracked. "Exactly. And if I stay, it means I accept it. And I don't know if I can." Emma reached for his hand. He let her. For a moment, they just sat like that, palm to palm, forehead to forehead, letting everything unsaid pass between them like a final prayer. "I'll never love anyone the way I love you," she whispered. Jack nodded. That's the problem. They didn't kiss, they didn't scream, they didn't say goodbye. He just left. And Emma sat in the doorway until the sun rose, knowing some loves don't die from lack of feeling, they die from knowing too much. If you want more stories like this, real, raw, and unforgettable, subscribe. Because sometimes love hurts in ways no one talks about.